once again, it's time for Book Cover Bonanza, where I'll go through my vast library, my obscene library. The books aren't obscene. There are some obscene books, but mostly they're not obscene books. But it's an obscenely large collection of books. I'll go through and I'll grab book covers that I think are interesting and funny. First up, A Study of Communism by the man himself, J. Edgar Hoover. I picked this up in an estate sale. It's a signed first edition, and I will sell it. A cool cover of George Orwell's 1984. Kind of looks like the Children's Television Workshop edition of 1984. The Religious Body by Catherine Eyre. I have not read this, but I like the cover. It looks like it's about a nun who fell down the stairs. Comet's 9 Lives. It's a children's book about a cat that keeps dying in increasingly traumatic ways. If you're tired of reading stories about being afraid of ghosts, here are stories about not being afraid of ghosts. Short book. They're actually pretty funny. The Necronomicon. This is a very rock and roll cover. Very like 70s glam rock kind of cover. A carrot is as close as a rabbit gets to a diamond. Captain Beefheart interviews. This isn't like a funny cover or anything, but excellent book. This is kind of my Bible. Captain Beefheart interviews this guy. Temples of Convenience and Chambers of Delight. This is a book about beautiful toilets. Beautiful toilets. The PK Man by one of my heroes, Jeffrey Mishlove. It's an investigation of a guy that could summon UFOs. Someday I hope to get this signed by Jeffrey Mishlove. I have a few of his books. One of my heroes. Kurt Vonnegut, Bluebeard. I've actually not read this, but it's kind of a ridiculous cover. Limited edition chromium cowboy boots. Pretty beat up. Here we have Christmas Trolls by Jan Brett. Because 'tis the season. Kind of psychedelic, demented, terrifying trolls dancing in the forest. I like the way their hair looks. Here's an incredibly boring library-bound edition of A Clockwork Orange, which I think is kind of funny. Like a very intense, unboring book in this kind of like old-timey binding. I like this. Programming and Metaprogramming, The Human Biocomputer by John Lilly. Good cover, good title. I've read bits and pieces. Southside of Chicago. The Art of Making Dances by Doris Humphrey. If you ever wanted to make up some dances, this book will show you how. I'm drinking this enormous kale smoothie, so if I have shit in my teeth, this is why. Herbie the Matchmaker. Excellent book cover design. I haven't read it yet, but it appears to be a short read. I like the Herbie logo. My friend Dante bought me this book a while back. It's Books from The Simpsons. The whole book is screenshots of whenever a book appears in an episode of The Simpsons. It's kind of like almost like a zine. Here's another book that belongs to my wife, a kid's book. It's a Where's Waldo ripoff called Look for Laura. There's Laura. This is a weird book I found in a little free library. Kind of like Hallmark gift shop book about the philosophical concept of security, but with Peanuts characters. It's really weird. It's a book about feeling secure and security populated by Peanuts characters. I thought this was cool. I found this the other day. Also in a free library, Barry Lyndon. I love the movie, of course, Stanley Kubrick. Maybe I'll read this someday. The Secret World of Teddy Bears. I feel like most of my wife's books are very strange vintage children's books. I don't know if this is for children, actually. You can see the teddy bear climbing the stairs. Secret World of Teddy Bears. Gathering Moss, a natural and cultural history of mosses. Robin Wall Kimmerer. It appears it won the John Burroughs Association Award. I'm actually excited to read this, as I'm a bit of a moss enthusiast. I read online once that you could grow moss anywhere you wanted if you like blended moss with beer in a blender or something. Or milk. Maybe it was milk. So I blended up this moss in the blender and I threw it into the concrete light well of my building, and because I was hoping it would all become covered in moss, but it didn't work. It looked like somebody had just thrown up a bunch of moss in the light well of our building. I found this in the free library the other day, A Few Words in Defense of Our Country, the biography of Randy Newman. I am a Randy Newman fan, but I don't know if I need to know this much about Randy Newman. Might get rid of it. Hit me up in the comments. Everyone in Northern California owns this book, All That the Rain Promises and More. It's a classic by David Aurora. It's just like a classic mushroom hunter's guide Excellent book. I have a few copies of this. Do I need a few copies of the book? Probably not. Mr. Samler's Planet by Saul Bellows. This is actually one of my favorite books of all time, but this cover is very funny. It's a great book. I have like 1,000,000 copies of this. Tons of different covers. Here's a much more subdued book cover of Mr. Samler's Planet. Breeding hamsters. I owned quite a few hamsters growing up. Someday I might get into the lucrative business of breeding them. Here we have Nausea by Sartre. Guy looking nauseous on the cover. This was just laying around the apartment. I randomly picked it up the other day. I've been meaning to read it for years, and I started it, and it's incredibly good. I'm only about a quarter of the way through it, but it's one of the best things I've read maybe all year. The Man That Corrupted Hadleyburg. A mysterious stranger descends on a small town to teach its deceitful residents a lesson by Mark Twain. A short read. I have not read this yet. God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater by Vonnegut. Excellent cover, excellent design. The pages are blue. Nathaniel West, The Day of the Locust. This is actually one of my favorite books. This cover is really literal and stupid, but I kind of like it. I have many copies of this all over the house. Tom Robbins, Another Roadside Attraction. I just found this the other day. I love the cover. I've actually never read this. I've always had a hard time getting into Tom Robbins. He's a little too quirky 60s hippie guy, but I like this cover, so I might read it. Another Saul Bellow, Humboldt's Gift. Kind of a ridiculous cover for a pretty excellent book. Not like the best Saul Bellow, but very, very good. Here's a cute little collection of the great short stories of Guy de Maupassant. They are indeed great short stories. I'm a big fan. 9 times out of 10, if you start reading one of his short stories, you'll get pulled in. You'll read the whole thing. He also wrote Bellamy. I loved that book a few years ago when I read it. The Rat by Günter Grass. I love this cover. It wraps around. I will read this because this cover got me. I love covers with rats on them. My next book, I may put a rat on the cover. The Story of Hester Mouse, who became a writer and saved most of her sisters and brothers and some of her aunts and uncles and cousins from the owl, by Russell Hoban. Pictures by Lillian Hoban. Very cute book. So this was one of my favorite books when I was a little kid. Miss Nelson is Missing. My mom used to read it to me all the time. It's set in Texas, where I'm from, and it's just a classic. And then last night, walking home from work, I found Miss Nelson is Missing in Espanol. Body Trauma, A Writer's Guide to Wounds and Injuries. This book has actually been very helpful in the writing of my novel. Recently, I've been referring to this quite a bit. Here we have Beano, the Beano book. I love this cover. I love this art style. It's a very British thing. I need to track down more Beano books. I found this in a thrift store in Petaluma, California, I believe. Another Saul Bellow. I didn't mean for this to be like a Saul Bellow video, but I have so many Saul Bellow books. Every time I see a Saul Bellow book cover that I don't have when I'm at a used bookstore, I buy it. The Dean's December, here's another copy. 2 boring covers for an incredibly boring book, but beautiful book. Boring, beautiful. I love this cover of The Stranger. Got this at Community Thrift here in San Francisco. I love this cover so much that I talk about the cover in my new novel. And anyway, and finally, and also, buy my book. Link in the description. The Fact of the Moon is Stranger Than Most Dreams. About 3 stoner artists in San Francisco that get caught up in a world of conspiracy that leads them into the desert and into a psychedelic whirlpool of high strangeness. So anyway, that's probably enough. I could go through my books for hours and hours and hours. Like I said, hit me up. I may sell any of these books because I'm poor and everything must go. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this edition of Book Cover Bonanza.